scary because I've never had a gun put in my face. They asked my name and my date of birth and asked me did I have any warrants, and I told them no, I didn't.
She says she was then handcuffed and released around 3 a.m. Fisher says she was told if anyone had any kind of warrant out for them, even if it was unrelated to immigration, they would not be released. Citizen App video shows the chaotic scene overnight. Neighbors tell us there were dozens of ICE agents. Neighbors like Ebony Watson says they ducked for cover as they heard several flashbangs go off.
They was terrified. The kids was crying. People was screaming. They looked very distraught. I was out there crying when I seen the little girl come around the corner. Because they was bringing the kids out too. Had them zip tied to each other. That's all I kept asking. Where's the morality? Where's the human? One of them literally laughed. He was standing right here. He said, them kids.
Watson says budget trucks and military-style vans were used to separate parents from their children. Other neighbors say they saw agents destroying property to get in the building.
And they had a big 15-inch chainsaw with a round blade on it cutting this fence down. We're under siege. We're being invaded by our own military.
The FBI did confirm this morning that they did help the U.S. Border Patrol carry out a targeted immigration enforcement operation in this area, and they say they have been supporting these efforts at the direction of the U.S. Attorney General.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Mark Schmurley, the host of Living in the Promised Land, an immigrant rights podcast. And today we are going to talk about the North Lake Processing Center in Michigan. And that's a December 18th, 2025, 1 week before Christmas. And speaking of Christmas, we are coming to you tonight. Well, I'm in Maryland, but my guests tonight are in a very cold, snowy place. And as we discuss that, we can hit the term ice. So you all have seen what's happened in Chicago. We're going to do a show on what's happened in Chicago, one of the really extreme terrorist actions on in whole neighborhoods in Chicago, Little Village, and others. The vindictive. There's no other way around it. The vindictive actions of the administration against the both the city and the politicians, and just the absolute violence. There was a clergy member shot in Chicago by ICE, but Chicago, like Maryland, does not have immigration detention within the state, with the state of Illinois, because the voters rejected it. So that means they go to detention centers in other states, and in Maryland they may go to, they may send them to Virginia in the past, but now they get them down to Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, and which is really the dark hole of immigration detention. And in Chicago, they have a place in the state next door, Michigan, called the North Lake Processing Center, and that's in northern Michigan. And in the brutal cold, through thick and thin, there's been a constant vigil outside of there. Witness at the border is there too, and not just because they act on every border, but because they really built their grassroots movement, and they've attracted people from other movements who have just been really horrified. And again, these are the folks who are leading the charge. We talk about this all the time. We as lawyers can have so much of an indignity and so much pushing, and then people will see us as self-interested. But when people see their friends and their neighbors horrified by this, and they hear it, and like we saw in Alligator Alcatraz, we saw typical people down there, and you can say, oh, typical people who might be liberal or what have you, but typical people who have the empathy of caring for their neighbors and knowing what's right and what is wrong and what is horrifying, and who don't want, as we saw with Japanese internment, which at the time that it happened was a 93% approval. And now it would not have that in hindsight. There's a few people out there. I think it was Michelle Malkin, wrote a book defending it, but she's an extreme racist on the far right. So that's that, and I know this because I did my undergraduate thesis on Japanese internment, and I wanted to do the opposition movement, and there really wasn't an organized opposition movement. And so and that's happened with a lot of immigrant detention and deportations in the past, and that happened. And we talked about the 1996 immigration bill that was so horrifying, and there was not a movement against that because it came in the time of the first World Trade Center bombing, the bombing of Oklahoma City. It came in the wake of the crime bill. It came in that era of the 90s when black churches were burned, when the Olympics were bombed, when there was a very strong violence, mostly by the far right, by militia types in the United States. But of course, um, when you're talking about security in the United States, it could be the Ku Klux Klan these days, and anti-immigrant legislation is going to come out of that, which is exactly what happened in 1924 in a law that went into effect, in 1924 and 1925. So we are 100 years catching up and back where we were. Uh, One of the things we'll talk about next week that happened in the last few days, and we'll get a hold of it, is that there are many more countries that the president has put onto the ban of entering the United States, including notably most of Africa and people from the Palestinian people from who have Palestinian travel documents because they are known to commit human rights violations and terrorism on the West Bank. Um, Caveat: nobody with an Israeli passport, meaning or a U.S. passport, living there, even though many are sanctioned in the United States for the terrorism that they commit against Palestinians. The settlers on the West Bank are not. So we'll talk about the just absolute racism that's gone into that, like the codified racism, and how that's horrifying us. So, but I want to welcome our guests tonight. Two people from Witness at the Border. Both were from Indivisibly before, and I want to welcome Cindy uh, Bay Barron. Cindy, welcome, and Gabe Keese. So, Cindy, let's start with you. How did you get involved with this, and tell us a little bit about it, this detention center?
I first became aware of the facility in Baldwin when I attended a No Kings rally planning meeting in the Mecosta County area. And I met some individuals and they began sharing their concerns about the Baldwin facility and that it was housing individuals who had not been given due process and were just snatched off the street. So that's where I then started becoming part of the Witness Baldwin program.
And when was that?
The first witness presentation at the Geo facility, I believe, occurred in September. So I started like when we were planning in July and August for the No Kings is when my first awareness and discussion started. But the actual showing up at the facility in Baldwin, I believe, started in September.
And Gabe, what about you?
I'm very much similar. I attended meetings with Indivisible of West Central Michigan. And many of the members there were also members of Witness at the Border, Witness Baldwin. And they brought up concerns about the Geo facility and that they were going to stand outside the facility to witness and to talk with families and to make their presence known to Geo and to ICE and the other groups affiliated with them. My first witness was, I believe, early November this year.
Okay. So, by the way, folks, Cindy, what is your occupation?
I'm retired. I was a social worker for decades.
Okay. And Gabe?
I'm a pharmacy technician by trade.
Okay. So, how much was it immigration and immigrant rights and on your radar before this?
I think for myself, like many people, it was something I was aware of, but I was not aware of just how badly immigrants were treated, not just legally, but also just culturally. Um, Being a part of groups like Indivisible allowed me to find out about things like throughout our nation's history, not just the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, but also the 1924 Immigration Act, which limited pretty much all forms of immigration from Europe except for immigrants coming from South America. And even before that, you had examples like the Chinese Exclusion Act, different things like that. And being a part of this group has made me more aware that for many of these people, sadly, that this is just the logical extension of something that has been building for decades, pretty much.
And Cindy, what got you aware?
It was not on my radar in a way that I feel it could have been. And so now that it is something that I am painfully aware of, that's right in my backyard, I really want to promote awareness for other people who, like me, didn't really understand the impact on so many people in our communities. And it's just horrifying. So I'm much more aware now than I have ever been.
And that is, I mean, it's kind of we equate it to sort of a boil that's come to the surface. It's horrible for those of us that have been there the whole time. But I think, Gabe, what you're talking about is these. I mean, you're in the 1% and maybe the 0.5%, because you mentioned Japanese internment people. Um, People are learning more about. There's been more, a little bit more into popular culture, but certainly people don't know about the 1924 Immigration Act or the Chinese Exclusion Act. And that's why on the show we're going to do a series of shows on that as a popular version of history, because people find out about these things when they're doing their cross country trip. And with the economy as it is, people are driving around, if gas is okay. People in parts of the country are like, oh my gosh, this was I mean, one of the Fort Sill, I believe, in Texas was an internment facility before. So they're really in your face. And one of the things about these white nationalists that are in power right now is that they are proudly reinvoking some of the most horrifying incidences in history as um, uh, examples, and they kind of always have. I mean, I once debated somebody from FAIR, which is, you know, an anti-immigrant group, but pretty small in the time, a Federation for American Immigration Reform, and he was a former ambassador, and he was very buttoned down. He's very, and he talked about the 1924 Immigration Law Act as a normal piece of legislation, a normal law that was a guidepost, as if, people who want to go back in time, people who will often hide behind, well, this was in the Constitution and we need to be originalist, and there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about any of these rights. So only the if it's not in the Constitution, they call themselves originalists. Well, he was at that time, and I said in my debate with him, I said, he is he he he's endorsing and um you know bowing to a law which was essentially written by a Senate and Congress that was controlled by the Ku Klux Klan, that was wouldn't that blocked anti-lynching legislation, that was a very this was what they were, and a white supremacist Senate where the Klan marched into DC openly, and this was your Senate. So I said those are his heroes. And and this is the thing, is you hide behind certain figures, and now we have people in power who are sort of openly worshiping the most heinous parts of our history, and like Confederate soldiers, and like you know segregationists. And so is saying this was our history and claiming it, and they are making it so that people in places like Wyoming, California, Michigan, when it came to immigrant, workers in Michigan, all that history can be erased, and then you don't see both, the resistance to the 1924 immigration law and the restrictions of that time. So this is what, I think when you take away history, you take away the ability to put anything into context. So that's
Mhm.
interesting there, right? So yeah, and so there you were. You both went, and it's not something you had done before, and so you what did you do? If so, how often were you going at first?
It to
Um,
me, it's always I have gone on the Saturday ones, and then we had one lovely coordinated effort with a church from Grand Rapids, and they did a Sunday choir event singing to the facility.
Now, what
mhm.
kind of church from Grand Rapids?
Do you remember?
I think it was. I can't remember the name sadly, but they're a fairly well-known church in Grand Rapids, and I believe they actually a couple of the members I spoke with also participate in the protests in Grand Rapids at Gerald Ford Airport.
At the airport.
Yeah, for the protest against Avelo Airlines, which is the airline that ICE uses to transport individuals that they capture.
Yeah, they're also open in Avelo. That's Avelo for folks watching. And they do fly out of Baltimore Washington International Airport too. I think they
Mhm.
have a flight to Grand Rapids. They have like it's one of these airlines that flies to places that don't get a lot of flights other than like the tiny planes from the major airlines, and but they make their real money on ICE flights. Um and unfortunately, if those protests are good, they shouldn't do that. But one of the things about that is that there are many people that are detained, and they are there for a long time, and the more flights they get out quicker. It's a it's a real it's a horrible choice that people have, uh, that this is what you sometimes root for, but sometimes we root for a quick deportation flight so that people aren't in these places. Um, so you've known of jails. I don't, personal experience with jails, so so but you're wondering, okay, I'm learning about this place opening. Who's it going to house, and what did they do, right? Those are your questions. So, what did you find out, Gabe? What did you find out about who's there?
About the facility itself and the people that are in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, the prison used to be it was a male, I believe, juvenile detention center when it first opened in the 90s. And it shifted a number of times until I believe in the 2010s it was shifted to a purely immigrant detention center. Um, and as for the people that are in this facility, a number of them are immigrants that came from Mexico or other countries in South America. We also have met families that immigrated from Iraq and at places in the Middle East. I believe there are also, courtesy of no detention centers in Michigan, I think there are also some people originally from Somalia in this prison.
Okay. Okay. So Cindy, when Gabe's talking about families coming in, where are they coming from? How are they getting there?
The ones that I have spoken with have driven long distances, typically out of state. We've had from Chicago. I recall one came from Minnesota, and so they take the drive typically to the facility. I haven't talked to anybody who flew in. So most of them are taking long driving treks. Some are not able to afford to stay overnight, so they make that long trip in one day. And then other families are able to stay overnight, and my understanding of visitation for families had been Saturdays and Sundays were the visitation opportunities. But that, because of the population increase of so many more people being housed there and the limited visitation location, it's a room that's got some limitations. They've now extended the visitation to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so on our Saturdays, we see fewer visitors coming in and out, partly because of the weather, but I believe also because they've spread it out. The other change in the population from what's on the website for this facility and what is in practice is it does house women now. Many of the visitors that I spoke to on their way out were family members. One family that I recall came from Chicago was a gentleman who had 2 children in the back seat and his mother and mother-in-law in the front seat. And he was visiting his wife, who was the mother of the 2 children. And they were young children and they had driven a very long way and they had to go back the same day. I have spoken to family members that they were not allowed to visit. They drove all the way up here and something occurred. Either it was a timing thing or a clothing thing that they were not dressed appropriately or some reason why they were not allowed their visit and they had to leave.
So what have the family seemed surprised by the conditions when they come out, or?
I talked to a couple of people that they were very hesitant to really have a conversation. And I tried to be very mindful because it's a very distressing circumstance that brings them there. And they don't know me. I'm just a person standing at the entrance giving them snacks. But one of the things that I did recognize is that the one group that I talked to, they were very hesitant. And they said that the person they were visiting, which was one of the children's in the back seat's father, I don't know the relationships with everybody, but she said that he was no longer really talking and that they would sit there and he was very hesitant to say anything and they were very concerned. And when they pressed him as to why, he just said, I don't want you to worry about me, but they hit me. And she was just so distressed and
How old was he?
And she had to leave.
How old was he?
She looked to be about mid-20s. She did not identify his age, but the child was an infant that she said was his child. So she was concerned about his mental well-being as well as what he was saying was his experience.
That the guards had hit him.
Yes. And he did not want to give any more information because specifically he did not want to worry her, and bless his heart, he probably caused her so much distress, but she was worried about him anyway because she said his demeanor was significantly changed. He just was not communicating. He was not talking. And that was different in her mind and very distressing for a young woman. I've heard of other family members saying that it was very, very cold in there. So I don't know. Michigan is cold anyway, but the facility I've heard, the hallways are not particularly heated, but the cells are. So as you transfer around, the walkways are not as well heated from what they have said. I've not been in the facility at all, but this is from people who have coming out that have decided to stop and talk to us at the entrance.
So Gabe, you're shaking your head. So on that, Gabe, you're shaking your head.
In agreement with what she was saying, but
so you've had the same experience talking with people?
Yes. A lot of the families that we talk with, whenever we are outside the facility, a lot of them are sadly hesitant because it is obviously a very distressing situation for them. They've traveled hours upon hours to see family members. Sometimes they don't even get to see them for whatever reason. We do know, thanks to a couple different people, a lot of the information gathered by a group called No Detention Centers in Michigan is where we get a lot of our information. They have a prisoner support network that they have that helps their families and people inside. They also have people inside the facility that work there that report on some of the goings on inside the facility's walls. By all accounts, the conditions in there are horrendous. I mean, there have been reports that the plumbing is basically shot. There's constant water leakage. They keep the lights on 24/7 The guards will conduct random cell inspections, even in the middle of the night.
So where is this reporting coming from?
It comes from no detention centers in Michigan. A lot of their information is compiled both from accounts by family members who have people trapped inside the facility, and also from people reporting from inside the facility that work there that are gracious enough to give us some information. Because the geo company itself has given no reports, on the conditions inside.
So do you know have I know this is an issue. Actually, you know, daily one of the news items of the week of the many that I didn't cover because there's so many is was that a federal judge overruled the administration rule that a Congress members of Congress or local state governments cannot just do spot visits on ICE detention centers, and now they can until an appellate court um, stays that decision, as we've seen a lot. So, um, have you seen any politicians come by and visit or to look into the facility?
I believe Cindy has seen them. I myself, I have not seen any myself, but I do believe Cindy has an account for at least one who has visited the facility.
Yes, we had a representative from downstate who came up because one of her constituents was a detainee, I believe a 19-year-old gentleman. And she came up to see and visit him and did a news report. That's how I know that there was one successful in-person visit at that facility by one of the Michigan state representatives.
Okay, and so yeah, I mean they're and there have been I mean in Alligator Alcatraz there were uh Congress people that went and they saw it, and the question is where is it going to hit people? And I think um when you see the kids, like I know um I work with one of the high schools here and helping to set up sort of a group of lawyers to help the families because ICE is everywhere. And there was one of the kids, just like you were mentioning, a 19-year-old high school student here whose dad had been deported, and he's from Guatemala, and he was detained, and our goal was to get him home. He didn't want to stay detained forever. He wanted to go home, and so that was our goal to do that. So the teachers were affected and the students, and it kind of goes in and to different levels, and I think people have different ways to be affected. And one of the people that I interviewed for at Alligator Alcatraz is a construction worker, and he's like, I can see what's going in there on the material. So everybody, this is the thing, this is something, environmentalists are involved in that. Religious folks are involved in that because we're talking about religious rights and so land, and so these things affect all the way around, and each of you, I mean, Cindy, you're talking like a social worker. How does it affect the child who's not, you're talking like a social worker. You're thinking of these families, you're thinking of the effect, and you're thinking of, okay, I understand, somebody is committed a heinous act, they're in jail, your dad's in jail, it's whether jail or not jail is what one believes in. That's a separate conversation. But in our system, the way it is, I know there's a good argument for the abolition of jails, and other countries do it in a lot less punitive way, and so the people come out a lot better. But here you're talking about people being affected, and I think this just sort of came to me, and I haven't really talked about it in this way, but I know it's in my mind. Having had experience with people in my family, and having been in jail and having taught in a jail and having represented people in jails for a long time until Maryland stopped doing it, is how much um, you know, people can go kind of two ways in jail. And, and even when you've got a quote good jail, like you had in like the most sort of liberal county in Maryland, you have, all of these programs, and people can even do college classes, people get degrees, whatever that might be, and they might be in there and they might change or what have you. And the system we have, and it's probably the best in it. Most jails aren't like that. Most jails people come out hardened because they're punitive, dehumanizing, etc. But oftentimes people are in jail and it's repeated because they're repeating it, but there's a culture in a jail. What we find here is that these aren't people that are used to being in jail because they came to the United States and overstayed their visa, maybe they came here to apply for asylum. They maybe they came to the border because they were fleeing something in their country, but it's minuscule the amount of people that they're detaining that have committed crimes, and the ones that get people, just to be a little bit of a lawyer nerd here, but if you've committed a crime and you are deportable, even if you've served your time, even if you've been in jail for 6 years. My client was there for burglary 7, 8 years. Yeah, that crime makes you deportable in most cases. Okay, but when you get out, you've served your time. And if you were a person in the United States who was a citizen of the United States and you finished your time, you would then be in the road to rehabilitation. And nobody would say you're a criminal Michigander or a criminal, but they will always say you're a criminal alien. Because if somebody is a drug dealer or those things that they say they are, then they serve their time in jail first. And so, unless, of course, you're the ex president as of 2 years ago of Honduras, where you had a 45-year jail term for, trafficking drugs into the United States and you get a pardon from the president. But other than that, yeah. But the people that you see, I can tell you, everybody, people are beginning to realize this. And because people see the videos of who's arrested and they're on their way to work and they're on their way, and they see the manner that they're being arrested. And of course, a lot of this is illegal, but the problem is it's whack-a-mole. There's so many things, and you're talking about resources and all of that. So that's part of it, is that when you said that he had changed, that's exactly the way. I don't know if you guys know who Badr Kansuri is. He's from Georgetown. He's a professor at Georgetown, and he was detained because his wife was the daughter of one of the advisors to Hania, the head of the Palestinian, the head of the government of Gaza. And so he is Indian. He's Muslim. He's from India himself, and he teaches at Georgetown. And his political views aren't. It wasn't his views that they went. I mean, I think he supported Palestinians, but nothing. There was nothing. He was a professor. He was like pretty normative, and he was arrested and he was detained in Texas, and he had his. They kept his trial there, even though he got out, and he's lost his asylum case, etc. But he was, I know him a little bit, and he was telling me about how when the and I experienced this a little bit too, is when often the husbands, but the wives would call from here, and the husbands would all be, he would see them on the phone saying, I just want to go home, stop all the legal work, because the psychological damage. And there's actually one thing that the ACLU explained to me in my case in Louisiana is there's actually a plan for ICE that they know that 3.5 months, 3.5 months, if you have a lawyer, is when you'll break. It's much less if you don't. And so I think what you were seeing is that, as a social worker, right?
Oh, it's
And
intentional cruelty. It's intentional terror within the communities, not just the detainees, not the people just snatched off the street. It's intended to have that chilling effect. And I can see it in their eyes. It's very, very distressing for the people, very distressing for them.
you see that in the families.
Yes.
Yes.
And Gabe, interesting question for you is you're a pharmacy tech. You were saying that your wife is studying to be a pharmacy, so you're a pharmacy family. And so I remember when I used to go to the jail. I said the jail that I liked, but the jail that my clients were in that had all these facilities. I remember the guys were lined up to get their medications, and they were happy getting them. Like, oh, this is great. Like they were going to a normal pharmacy, like it was
Mhm.
fine. So you were probably curious about the medical care, right? You're probably curious about that. So where'd that
Yes.
lead you? What'd you find out?
For the people inside the facility, I unfortunately am not too aware of the medical care that does go on inside this facility. Um, some of the people who work at the Geo facility, I do know fill prescriptions at two of the pharmacies in Baldwin. Um, as far as I'm aware, a lot of the emergency medical care in particular, has to be outsourced. There's no real like emergency room in Baldwin. So whenever an emergency medical incident occurs, they have to take them very far away from the facility. We've heard of an instance where uh, this again comes from no detention centers in Michigan, of a prisoner who attempted suicide, and he was transported in the middle of the night. I unfortunately don't know the exact outcome of this particular case, but he had to be transported very far from the facility, I believe, to Grand Rapids.
Wow. How far is that?
From
About an
Baldwin,
hour
about
and a half drive,
an hour and a
about
half to
90,
2 hours.
90 minutes from Baldwin.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
if there's not a snowstorm, which this time of year
Mm-hmm.
happens sometimes in northern Michigan, I've heard. Yeah, so it's yeah, and so and from what you've heard, what do you? I mean, I know, because all of my visits were when I would visit are all on video, video visits, and I would see people with masks and people with coughs and everything, and I know that they're very close in because this facility holds 1,800 people. You were saying so. That's its capacity, and it's now at 1,400. So
Mm-hmm.
just the it's winter. Uh, it's an incubator, right? I mean, how prepared are they, in your view, to stem flu? I mean, are people getting their shots or I mean, what's your concern? What's your concern just
Well, there was actually a story that came out recently that no detention centers in Michigan and a couple of other news outlets reported on. There is now an outbreak of both tuberculosis and measles occurring amongst individuals in the facility. I mean,
so
that's a very great cause for concern. Those are both highly infectious, debilitating diseases, if left untreated.
so how do you okay, so that's no detention. So w- how do you stop the spread of that? Do you isolate people or
I would imagine that would have to be the only recourse, or the only other option I believe would be to have um doctors either come to the facility or transport those individuals to places where they can receive the proper medical care.
okay, so this brings us back. What makes okay, I'm gonna get a little political here. We know the horrible other places. Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana. 70% of people are detained in those three states,
Mhm.
both because it's the Fifth Circuit, which is horrific and is the worst, and also because nobody thinks of modern carceral policies being good in any of those places, and so they're all heavily conservative places. They're all governed by um, supporters of this policy and the president. Michigan, Michigan, strange state. I know this president won the state, but you have two senators who are Democrats. You have a governor who's a Democrat. You have attorney generals, all of them. So, what's your view of how they're approaching the conditions there, this detention center?
I can speak from experience that our own representative at the federal level, John Molinar, who is a Republican, has expressed very little, very little interest and concern about this facility. I have called and emailed his office a number of times over the last few months about the conditions in the Geo facility, and about the people that are being held in there. To which I almost never receive a proper response, aside from one occasion where I was sent an email from his office, which did not address the issue of the facility itself, but only stated that he was committed to enforcing lawful immigration and deporting illegal immigrants with criminal histories.
Yeah, that sounds like an autopilot.
Mhm.
Cindy, has that been your experience too, or?
I personally feel that it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. I totally agree with our current representative, Mr. Molnar. He is not engaged and concerned about human dignity and human rights. He's just not. But I believe that the governor and some of our other senators could be much more active in supporting this. And I think that activity like this podcast and every Saturday that we show up moves us forward in that area where more people of position can take a look and maybe do more in what their capacity is.
Well, what have you seen? I mean, because look, Michigan's it's not a state that I'm super familiar with. I mean, I've been and done a little bit in the Detroit in the last few years, but it's not it's a very just I feel like a disparate state. Like there's these sort of pockets, and it's a sort of strange state in that way. Something like a Pennsylvania that way, and it's hard to have a statewide to organize on this stuff, and it's hard to get you know sort of attention. But what have you seen? I mean, I know it's hard. I know it's just beginning. I know there's 1,000 things thrown at us. I mean, it's. I was in Ohio this summer, and I went to Springfield and talked to folks and did a show from there. And I know, people in Ohio, it's a shell shock town, but people in Ohio, we're also losing their school lunches, and people are losing their, Medicaid and all that. And I know that Michigan is not, it's the wealthiest state all the way through. So there's a lot of folks in, getting hit all around. And also, you guys get a lot of stuff from Canada, tariffs effect, and all these things that I can imagine. Like there's so many things being thrown at us. But what do you see? I mean, here you are. You guys are, you're so energized. It's kind of new for you. This is something, and the level of shock. But it's also very different for people in your towns. I mean, neither of you live in, if then you could tell me if I'm wrong, but you don't live in immigrant rich towns or towns where people are thinking about that. So in your community, in your world, in your friend, like as you radiate this, what you see now and radiate this sort of call for justice out, what are you seeing? What's been positive? What's been hard? Cindy,
For me, it has been just the lack of awareness. And when I communicate and talk to people, and when I post the pictures of us up there, people that I thought were well versed in information were totally unaware. And I'm happy to say, as appalled as I am
Good.
with the information that they are becoming more aware of and learning as I'm sharing it, and they become more interested in learning more about it. I have had very, very few negative responses. I've had a couple of people who didn't really think it was that bad and just give them a little bit of information, and they were on the same page as I am, that they were as appalled and surprised that that would happen. But one of the things about Baldwin and Lake county specifically in the whole state
Yeah.
of Michigan. It's one of the most economically challenged areas. It is
Mhm.
considered one of the poorest communities. It's a lovely community. It has lots of natural beauty, lots of wonderful people, but the economics of this is a very big conflict for people.
Mhm.
You want to provide for your family, but at the same time, you want to have a soul. You want to have compassion for your other humans. One of the things I will say in watching the staff turnover, because we're there at shift changes, there's a lot of out of state tags. There
Mhm.
are a lot of staff who are from Florida, the
That was
license,
and
and
I
Texas.
remember when they were talking about talking about
Right.
reopening the facility. One of the main arguments that the Geo Corporation had for for reopening the facility was that it would provide jobs for the local community, for the people of Baldwin. Um, but that has very much not been the case. In fact, I know of very few people in the Baldwin area that are employed at this facility. And as Cindy was saying, many of the workers that we see come through there with every shift change, many are from Texas, Florida, many out of state license plates.
So are they? Did they move there then, or did they?
Yeah,
Uh,
I believe that they
I,
brought their talent. Majority of the talent came from out of the area.
mhm,
One of the Saturdays, there was a woman there who had been an employee when it was opened in the previous years, not now, but in the previous years. And she said she would never work in a circumstance like that again. She worked there for up until it closed, but she said she could not bring herself to go back into that environment and be paid to do that. So I think that they have had a history in that community that more people are reluctant to have that as their employment. But
Oh,
it is the
interesting.
largest employer in that area right now.
Oh,
mhm.
but a lot of the folks are coming from out of state, and so, I mean, do you think they moved there and just haven't changed their place, or are they there temporarily?
I think you have
It,
to be there a year before you have to change your plates.
Oh, okay.
mhm,
I think you have a grace period where, and that's if they want to be legal. They're doing other
mhm.
things that's not legal, so I'm not sure I hold that standard to them, but
Yeah, and they may not get prosecuted. Now that's
and it
interesting.
might be a company car. It might be geo provided
Mhm.
for them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that could be because it's really so mysterious what people know about these companies, and that's the crazy thing because just when I started out, mid '90s when I was in law school and all of that, immigration detention centers were they hadn't even really contracted with counties or states. Counties might hold them for a little while, but they had these immigration detention centers, and within them, um, they were really run by INS then, and they were they held people, but they were something like what one think of minimal security. They didn't wake you up at 4:30 in the morning. They didn't keep lights on. You were not considered a criminal, and even as is the evolution of that, it was, you had counties that were doing it, and then they had, there was mixed of, how that worked, but they would have a wing for the immigration folks, and ICE would visit, and ICE would sort of act as, okay, here's your court date, these are the documents you need. Like no, they weren't perfect, and they would give bad advice, and they wouldn't. But now they don't even show up, and I know you guys probably wouldn't know. I mean, the lawyers might tell you, but how often ICE shows up to tell people normal things about their cases because they're sort of just say, "Oh, you can leave and take this to part over." Just like ICE isn't there to make sure that they get their needs met, and ICE is responsible.
Many of the visitors who have stopped to talk to us on their way out of the visitation contact with their person who's the detainee have said that they've been held for months and they've not had a hearing at all. They have
Mhm.
not yet had an opportunity to know what their charges are, and yet they're detained hours away from their home without even knowing what the crime is that they're accused of.
And it's often hard for them to get a lawyer because they're the breadwinner, and lawyers are hard to find, and you've got and there's a reason they put these places so far away. because there's no lawyers near them. And that's why when Maryland ended detention, it was an abolition movement. Abolitionism is abolitionism, but it took places like where they were 20 minutes away, one of the detention centers halfway between Baltimore and Washington. So we would all have access to places where you're very, very far away and it becomes prohibitive. So yeah, it's and so people don't, this is the process of immigration detention, and then you put them in a community like that, or in Western Louisiana or Mississippi, where there is very economically distressed. Um, but it's interesting because there were people in Alligator Alcatraz, because there's no plumbing and all that, that have left, and they've kind of been whistleblowers a little bit. So no, that's really interesting. I wonder how the Floridians and Texans will, if they are Floridians and Texans and not company cars, will deal with the winter there. Um, but you all are still out there. I mean, it's the same as, when people were, I mean, not the same, but when they're in the Everglades in the middle of August on a Sunday afternoon, and stay under those tents. It's kind of, um, you all, the thing is, you all know how to bundle up. You all know how to stay warm for times. You're used to it. It's not like here where people are on the cusp of the north and the south, so everybody has different dress when it comes to winter here. There there's a uniform way that people know how to make it and survive. And so, what do your signs say? Like, what is the message that you're doing? Are you like silently out there, or are you?
We do hold signs. We have a sign for our own organization, Witness Baldwin. Also, we hold a sign um, that says "Communities, not cages," provided to us by another group. We also have our own signs that we have made. One of them I remember says "Rest in peace, justice." Um, a couple of other a couple of others include, I believe, Geo out of Michigan, or immigrant rights are human rights, Geo out of Michigan, things of that nature.
I have one just as a nonverbal. I have a heart on a big pink sign, and I have a
Mhm.
basket of snacks so that people can see that I want that to be as welcoming as possible, because not everybody stops to read our signs. But
Mhm.
we had one individual come out and stop and said, "We heard, are you giving out food?" So I
Mhm.
know that someone inside shared that information for them to stop on the way out to know that that was one thing that we were providing. So I gave them some food
Mhm.
because it's such a long trip. No matter who it is, they are driving hours to come up and visit their loved one.
So so have you gotten any pushback from the facility or their people, or?
We only really had one instance that we experienced where a person from inside the facility let us know that we were not allowed to go past the tree line, um, even though the members of our group that she did give this information to were nowhere near the tree line. That was really the only.
Gabe, you got to explain that. Because when I think tree line, I think high mountains. So explain that.
Okay,
I
yeah.
can't be the only one confused.
So basically, the facility has the front gate that you enter in, and then it has the inside of the facility itself. The facility itself is surrounded by trees,
Oh, okay.
um, and in this tree line near this uh, tree line in front of the gate, they have private property signs everywhere to let you know that you're not allowed to go past that tree line.
So it's a
Um,
border of trees on the property line.
yep.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you can't go. Okay. Um, but you do encounter them coming and going.
Yes. We have actually had a few instances of people who work at the facility that express regret for what happens in that facility and for the work that they do. But for many of the people that do work there from the Baldwin area, it's really the only source of employment that there is. So many of them have to reconcile that. Many of them have to reconcile that they need to provide for their families, but they're also um, participating in the act of separating other families.
Witness Baldwin, our group's main intent is to be non-confrontational, to
Yes.
just be a silent witness, to let the community, people in and outside of the facility, know that people are watching and that we care, that it matters what's going on and it's not okay.
And
We have had a number of families that when they do come up to talk with us, have expressed immense gratitude for what we do. Many of them said that because of all of the things that happened with the arrest of their family members and whatnot, that they felt that everyone in the country, all Americans, hated them. And they said it was very good to know that there were still good, decent people that are willing to call out this kind of thing and stand up for the right things.
And one comment that made me have a little joy in this horrible circumstance is I was told by a couple of staff and visitors, some people can see us from the windows.
Yes.
And we've had people come out and stand with no coats on. They're freezing just to watch us. We don't know why. But so that tells me that even if nobody says anything to us, our presence says something to them. And I want to just give them a little hope, because it has to be horrible to be detained in such a remote and isolated location, so far away from everything that you know and people who care for you.
Right. And, it's, yeah. And, I mean, you're coming out as a social worker, but everybody has families. And that's the point. I think what we're seeing is there's just so much noise out there that what's so critical is to just, we've got to build it from the ground up. And it's going to take a lot because, I was, Gabe, you're talking about history and how it goes now. It's it's always the hope in the United States, and I don't I personally don't come from a nationalist. I think it's a human condition of more than just just it's a human condition is that um we there's certain things that are ingrained, but one of the other things that's ingrained is that I think when people are in a community, they especially when they're not exclusive or what have you, but they're just it's not vindictive for vindictive sake is not really part of many places. And also I think people realize like that's not what they want their communities to be. I think there's just so much that we're let down. I mean, there needs to be, like you said, you don't have uh, a total. You don't have Ted Cruz and running you know. But even in Louisiana, one of the things that's crazy about Louisiana is that Steve Scalise does advocate for people and gets them out because he's powerful, because he knows, like, okay, these are people in the university. Like, it's not you can't say immigrants are a certain ideology, a certain anything. It's just it's the most raw level of fear and bigotry to be anti-immigrant, which attacks us on all other levels. And then people feel like you're saying unwelcomed, and then they feel like, oh my God, like what did I do? And then they fear integrate. They fear connecting to people in the U.S. because they don't know what people think of them because of what they see. I mean, I've had clients who were like, one of the reasons they give up is I had a client that was in the media quite a bit, and they were like, no, we don't want to talk to any more media because the comment section. And he said, my wife looked at the comment section, and there might be bots from somewhere, but a lot of it isn't. And it's sort of like this control over people and this fear and not wanting to jump in and just I mean, it's wonderful. You're there quietly, and I think you go to churches, you go to community centers, you go to unions, and you get people like, no, this isn't it, and you just slowly build it, and you guys have built a foundation in the snow, and that's pretty remarkable. So, I want to thank both of you really for all the work you do, and for being out there and for coming on in such short notice tonight. Gabe and Cindy, thank you so much. And I want, before we leave, this is my thing every week, is what is your I think you kind of told one of your positive things of the week, but what is your positive what gives you hope this week?
There was actually recently an article that was published. I forget the exact name of it, but it's a publication from Detroit, I believe, that talked about our activities along with those of in Chicago. Um, and it was reported that some of the people trapped in this facility could actually see us outside through some of the windows. And so for me personally, that I had never known that. I always assumed that nobody could see us inside of that building. Um, but the knowledge that they can actually see us outside, I think it fills me with an immense sense of hope that at the very least, the people in there, no matter how isolated, no matter how far they are separated from their families, no matter how much they are made to believe that they are less than human. Um, I think one of the thing that gave me a lot of hope this week, there was an article that came out from a news organization, I believe, out of Detroit, and they were reporting on our activities, the Witness Baldwin group, as well as groups in Chicago. And one of the things that they revealed in that article was that some of the people trapped in this facility can actually see us from the windows of the facility, which was something that I had never known before. I had assumed that they could not, in fact, see us outside of the building. Um, and so I like to think that for these people, no matter how isolated they're made to feel, no matter how far they're separated from their families or the people that they care about, no matter how much they're made to feel unwelcome or less than human, that at the very least, our presence gives them a small amount of hope that they will one day be released, and that we are there for them and for their families, because not all of us are okay with what is happening right now, and we believe in love, and we believe that these people should be set free.
You kind of said the same, but can you come up with another one, Cindy?
Oh, yes, I have lots of reasons to be joyful because there is good in the human race. One of the things I look forward to is in my experience when visitors stop, someone, and many times it's multiples, will say thank you, that it's appreciated. And I remember one woman saying that, and she was tearful. She thought all Americans hated them. And so she was so happy to see that we were there just as a statement that we are supportive of those individuals, and what's happening we feel is wrong. So that, even if it's only one car, it has always brought me great satisfaction. It is time well spent. Doesn't matter if it's only 14 degrees and 2 foot of snow.
Yeah, yeah, it's different up there, but yeah, and for me, one of the things that was actually like I mentioned is before is I was in a geo facility here today with a client, and they were reporting through ISAP, which is ICE's administrator, sort of, but not exactly ICE. It's a geo company, and it says it on the door. Nobody knows, they're sort of hidden there. But what I noticed was, they all knew each other, and like, do you live near each other? Like, why is everybody in this waiting room talking? And it made me think of one of the beautiful things of having the Latino culture here. Like, I mean, cultures from all over the world bring great things, but one of the things is there's a book that just came out called America, America by a professor at Yale. I forget his name. but it's a history. But he also talked about one of the things that divides the difference between the United States and in Latin American cultures in general, but um, is that is it's the communal, the things that we wouldn't do and things that they would, like the communal nature of the people that were there, that they're all talking to each other about their ankle bracelets or what their situation is, and we're all so guarded because we protect it, because we're sort of competing with each other, and there's this shame and all those things, and people often in Latin America they'll just talk about things and things in the community, and it's really, further than that, it's what really, one of the things is like labor unions were really revitalized a lot. SC, Service Employees International Union, United Food and Commercial Workers, like the unions that are big now, are at least in the last 30 years or so have been led by Latinos who come from cultures where what we had with immigrant communities when unions were really built here and other communities in smaller towns where people looked out for each other, because that's what that is, you're looking out for each other. And to see all these people like, well, you're still here with like you're all talking and there's no judgment, and it was like, and I saw that and it's like, this is what's going to defeat them. This is what's going to defeat them, because, and this is the lesson that we learn, the lesson that I learn all the time when I'm, living in these communities, is what really matters to people. And, when you think about, 8 people living in a house and pulling the resources, and what matters, what really matters to people is, and so I think that was just a little encouragement today. Is like, we're it's a shot, but it's their what's going to beat them and what's going to teach us. So that's what came to me. And so, Cindy, Gabe, thank you so much. All the work you do. We'll be back. We'll visit, and I want to, when you're out there, I want to do it. If we did it in Florida when it was 100 degrees and humid, I want to be there when it's 5 degrees in a blizzard. I want to see you guys out there. So we got to have a date at the end of January or so. All right, thank you,
We
We'll be
would
looking
look
forward.
forward to it. Thank you very
and and
much.
and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and you be well.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye bye.
See you Saturday, Gabe.
Yep, you too.